Simeon is watching from Australia. It's 2 a.m. there, but he's waited up just to watch.
Wow.
We're live too, by the way.
Wow. 2 a.m, Australia. Simeon's in Australia?
Yes. Simeon de la Vecchia.
Got it.
Howdy, everybody.
Hello.
We went live a little bit early just to let everybody come in, get joined in.
Right.
Right about noon, 12, a little after, we'll make a phone call to John Glaser.
What time is it in London?
They're 6 hours ahead.
6 hours.
So it'd be 6 p.m.
Perfect.
We got Tom R. is in here, Santa Cruising, Colorless Blue Things, William Slattery, or Scott Slattery, Jimmy Drammer, Simeon we've talked about, Andreas Toft, Sam Spears, Bobby Childs, Adventures in Whiskey, Christopher Malloy, Toon Van Rouge. Also,
Tahat's special.
Tahats. Look at what Food Quig said there. Tahats.
Yeah, Tahats. Look at that.
Amy's here. George is tuning in. Tolv Thomas, Duncan Harmsworth. We got a lot of people coming in early. Good. And like I was saying, we actually planned on going live just a little bit early, let people come in, talk to you guys for a little bit.
Make sure our connection's good.
Once we get enough people in here, or right before noon, before we call John, we're going to pop the top on the circus.
Woo! That's amazing.
I'm a man of my word.
Oh, yeah.
And that was when I said, when we get John Glaser on the show, the circus will be open.
Bam.
So what we'll probably do, though, is open it and let it sit through the interview. John, don't call him Mr. Glaser.
That's what he said.
Yeah, don't call him Mr. Glaser is my father.
Right.
He said, I am John.
So we're not being disrespectful when we call him John. And I won't say Sir John because that's a little flippant. So that is good. That is good. You've got the photo printed out.
Anyway, we'll pop the circus. We're going to let it open it, let it sit. We'll go through the interview with John. Once we get done with John, we've talked about we might end that stream just to keep it shorter,
so that it's easier to view
later. Yeah, for people coming in later, they'll just get the interview with John, and then we might start it. Maybe we're still debating. We'll kind of see where we're at time wise. We might start a new stream then. We'll continue our talk of Compass Box and get into the circus.
And then Mark's on.
Mark Gillespie should be coming on and joining us. He was instrumental in getting this set up, as well as one of our Patreon supporters.
Right.
And I don't know if he wants us to name him or not.
All right.
You can shoot me an email if you want me to call you out. But right now, a Patreon supporter. We had mentioned trying to get John Glaser on the show.
Sure.
One of our Patreon supporters really initiated it, got the ball rolling. His people contacted some people who contacted other people, and they got with John's
Kevin
people.
Bacon involved. It's like 8 degrees of whiskey separation. Probably only 3.
Bobby Childs is tuning in. I pointed him out. He sent me. I've got it. We text back and forth occasionally. He's ready to pop his circus open with us.
Ooh, wow. It's like a circus.
I think Tom R. might be doing the same.
Wow. The big top's going. We sampled a little extravaganza.
We warmed up with a little bit of Spice Tree extravaganza. Do you want a little bit more? Do you want something else? Or do you want to?
I'll let you call it. This is your collection.
Well, what do you want to?
Extravaganza would be great. How about a little bit more?
Okay.
It was delicious, full of flavor. Now, we have joked around a little bit that Mr. Glaser doesn't know us very well. So John doesn't know us very well. So calling in, it's kind of like that first date where you're not sure how it's going to go and you want to do a coffee, just a coffee. You want more of this?
Yeah,
is that what that is?
Yep,
All right.
Yep.
All right. So this is like a coffee date. Can we call it that?
Sure. We gave John the choice. First of all, we were surprised John was willing to come on.
Very nice. Sure.
We knew someday it would happen.
We're goofy, but
we didn't know
part of the love.
We didn't know if we were there yet.
Yeah. We'd be like, "You want to come on the show?" Not yet.
So, yeah. When he agreed to come on, we were emailing back and forth, and he says, "This is a phone interview, right?"
Sure, whatever way you want it.
We explained to him YouTube, the live streams, Google Hangouts, or phone. I said, we've done some phone call stuff in the past. He said, let's stick with the phone call this time. Understandable.
Let's see what you guys are about.
Daniel Brown asks, Scott, does your wife know you text strangers and are planning to pop something together? When you put it that way, it does sound
right.
bad.
Sounds bad. My wife was told my son she was disappointed in me yesterday. Right. We had a whole birthday party thing. There was a niece that had to be taken home. My wife's taking the niece home. I'm downstairs working on the computer. The boys are playing video games. I literally look up and it's 9:30 at night, well past bedtime for the boys. So I'm marshaling the troops. Let's go, brush the teeth. I'm upstairs. I'm like, go, come on, mom will be home any second. We got to get you in bed. Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm tucking in the little one. In comes the big one and goes, mom's already here. I'm like, what? Because I've been like yelling in the house, let's go. We got to beat mom coming home. Come on. And I'm like, you're kidding me. He goes, she was in the bedroom. So while we're in the basement, she'd come home, was there.
You didn't know it.
Did not know it. She had not made her presence known. And so my son's telling me she's already here. I'm like, oh no. He goes, what? I go, I bet you she's mad. He goes, why? I go, because I've not kept you guys on your bedtime. I'm probably in trouble. Well, as I'm tucking the lad in, the little one, he disappears. The older one comes back and says, I asked mom if she was mad at you. She said she wasn't, just disappointed. And I'm like, oh no, that's worse. He goes, why is that worse? I go, disappointed carries a lot more guilt than mad. I can handle somebody being mad, but not disappointed.
See, I'd take disappointed over mad.
Oh,
Mad's
God,
a step
no.
past disappointed.
See, I don't think so.
Yeah.
People get mad, but when they're disappointed, it's like they thought you were capable, but you failed. Mad's just mad.
415, by the way.
416.
Yeah, I'd take disappointed over mad.
Oh, boy, I don't know. See, disappointed hit me deeper in the soul. I make people mad all the time.
For those that are tuning in, we went live a little bit early just to let people come in. We're about 11:52 now. Right at noon, a little bit after, we'll make a phone call to John Glaser. He is coming to us, I believe, from Edinburgh. Is that that's where the office is? London-ish, somewhere?
I don't think so.
No?
I think he's right in London.
Okay.
And he's got the King Street address.
That's where it's
right.
Okay,
but
office.
That's like I think the shipping or office address, which is what classifies everything that is.
So London. He'll be coming from London?
He is from London.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe in London. But who knows? Maybe he's traveling. He could be anywhere. He might be in Glasgow. He might be in Edinburgh. Who knows?
Mark Gillespie should be joining us at some point. Also,
we pop in. We'll see. In.
Just as I say his name, I think he's coming in.
Popping in.
Mark Gillespie of Whiskey Cast was instrumental in setting this up and getting us going. Of course, he knows John. Mark,
we can hear you.
Yep, we got you.
Can you see me okay?
Yeah.
Let's see. We're still digitizing.
Yeah.
Looking good.
Yeah, it looks good. Good audio.
Okay.
Yeah, we got
Give me a couple seconds here to get a glass and
Yeah. We are
right
live,
back.
Mark. We went live just a little bit early, let people come in and get here before we make a phone call to John. So
okay. Give me a second here and I'll be right back with you.
don't take your shirt off. People will see it.
Don't do a quig. He's like, did they say take my shirt off? What? Did they tell me to take my shirt off here? Yeah, so yeah, that was last night. Disappointed versus mad. So my son was very perplexed why it was what? You want the circus?
Grab the circus. Let's pop that thing open.
And it ships in this like bulletproof container. Is that correct?
Yep.
Wow. That's
I'm gonna get two glasses. For those that are tuning in recently too, this has always been, I have said I'm a man of my word. When John Glaser joins us, when John Glaser joins us on the show, I will pop open the circus. Every whiskey has its occasion.
Yes.
And Compass Box motto, they have it on their walls, is above all, share and enjoy.
Share and enjoy.
So John Glaser's coming on the show. We're going to pour this. We're going to open it.
Your motto might be collect and look at it.
We're going to pour it. But we're going to let it sit for a little bit.
I'm just teasing you. You're opening it. I shouldn't mock you while you're opening it.
Yeah,
wow. Well, you're a big collector.
I'm just ignoring you.
I know, but you're a collector. You do like to collect. Would you admit?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be rude. the fact that you're opening it, you surprised me when you opened the general, and now this as well. Although you're right.
Oh, let's do it by the mics here.
Let me move the bulletproof container.
There it goes.
Ooh, look at that. What's it smell like?
The circus is open.
Woo! That still surprised me. That's a beautiful label, by the way.
One of my favorites.
Right. What's your other favorite as far as label?
Ooh, probably No Name. That black.
Really?
Black art and the black wax running down the side.
Yeah, the wax is cool. The circus just feels very 1890-ish. I don't want to. Yeah, right there. I don't want to drop
that.
That's perfect. Oh, you don't want me to block the live.
There we go. There's yours.
There we go.
There's mine.
It's good. It's going to get air.
Actually, I'm going to
spill it. I'm putting it further back.
I've got 415 here on my Spice Tree Extravaganza. I'm going to put 417 on my circus. 418 is going on Bart's circus.
Going on the circus. I like how you say it. All right.
Mark, how you been?
Doing okay, guys. I'm just trying to adjust audio at this end. And can you guys hear me okay now if I make with this adjustment?
Yeah, it was good. It got a little bit jarbled.
How about now? Is this better?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. And I'm trying to hear you guys on this one. And
got anything?
just a second here. Just a second here.
You're good. We can fill.
Tom R wants to know who the ringmaster is today.
The ringmaster?
Since we opened the circus.
Oh, well, it'd be you. This is your P.T. Barnum today.
I think Mark Gillespie is the ringmaster.
Sure. I'll give it.
Oh, no. Don't put that on me, guys.
We'll put it on you. Well, that makes me the bearded lady.
Thanks, Mark, for coming in, too. And I know you were instrumental in getting this set up
guys.
as well.
I had to adjust things around here.
Do what?
Everybody's getting a backstage look at the mechanics of making live TV happen.
Yep,
There
that's
you go.
right. What we're going to do is we went live a little bit early, right at noon or a little bit after Mark. We're going to make the phone call to John. He said he should be able to give us 20 minutes, give or take.
Okay.
So, and then we'll go from there. And what we may do, we were talking about, is when we get done with John, we might end this live stream, maybe, and start a new one. So if that happens, we'll send out another invite to you. That way we keep our YouTube video interview with John a little bit shorter, and it might encourage more people to watch later.
Okay.
Do you have a Compass Box with you? Do you got something you're enjoying with us?
Yes, this is something we can't talk about yet.
Oh, nice.
Maybe we can.
Yes. Well,
Well, here,
as soon as John comes on, I think he'll speak.
we thought we were on the front end.
We are not.
You are on
we are
on the
not.
front end.
You are far front end.
And then let's see. And of course, I'm all mic'd up now, so give me a second here.
Sure.
Yep. You're all right.
All right. So what else has been going on? So this is now early on. I think it's worth mentioning that in our first 20 videos, did we review 4 or 5 Compass Box edition? Do you remember?
I
shouldn't ask.
Several. Yeah. I mean, most of the core range.
Right. Because there was a point where we were just getting into all kinds of whiskeys, but really we're enjoying the Compass Box blends. I remember I even referenced at one point, or maybe somebody had put it in the comments, that we were like Compass Box fanboys. And then I had to quit mentioning that because you're like, quit saying that.
You're bringing it up all the time.
Yeah. Compass Box fanboy. But yeah, that was early on. And we'll get into it a little bit later when John comes on. But it is the peat monster that's responsible for me literally diving so deep into the peat, becoming a peat head. So, and that is strictly, and I even prejudged the peat monster. So we were new then.
What we're going to do too, for those that have tuned in recently, we'll place it. We're going to do a phone interview with John Glaser from Compass Box. We've got his phone number. He wanted to join us by phone. If we have a bad connection, if that's not working, we have his Skype address. We'll end the phone call and then hit him up over Skype.
But hopefully the phone's good. Phone should be solid. So
Depends on where he is in the world right now.
True. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. We don't know where he's joining us from. So
parts unknown, as they would say in professional wrestling.
there you go. Parts unknown.
What are you guys up to?
Well, we've been doing a big 60. Our March Madness is our Pete 16 blind bottle bracket.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's been a blast. We've just put out our first bracket of 4 on Saturday, and so we don't know. We each are sampling the same 4, but we don't know even which ones are in front of us. We've kind of done a double blind thing,
right?
So that's been fun, and then the fans, of course, in post get to see. My bottle A is Ardbeg. We've got the committee release, which actually, well, I guess they can go tune in to see where they all end. But so we're sampling, but we don't even have the same. I've randomly put the 4 samples in his Glencairns. He did the same to mine. So one of the oddest things is I'll be nosing and he'll be describing notes, and I'm so used to us having the same dram in front of us that I'm like, well, I'm not getting that here, and we know we've got different ones.
Yeah.
Although there is a future one where they a few of them have lined up.
Mm-hmm. Just randomly, it happened that way. But when we were shooting, we didn't know that.
Right.
So
that's always a challenge.
Right.
Because if you know what you're getting, you sort of know what to expect from a distillery, and you're looking for variations from the mean, deviations from the mean.
Right.
But when you're going completely blind, it's a bear.
I learned so much. We did the same thing with rye, 16 rye, and we did it again with 16 bourbons. The educational level that I received from that, and something that I had originally rated, and the bourbon one, it was the regular Elijah Craig. I'd rated it a little lower, and it just really shined through in the bourbons, and it was so enlightening to just examine what's in the glass. So, I mean, it was extremely educational for me. I love it. Mm-hmm. So we're having fun, and I'm into Pete. I love Pete. So, all
right, it's 12:03. You're ready to make our phone call to John.
And Mark, your visual looks great. It really came in clear. So it's looking good.
And let's see, put this on speakerphone.
We've got a few questions that some people have already sent us for John, but by all means, we'll try to watch some comments and get a few questions in that way as well. So,
hello, it's John.
John, I about said hello, Mr. Glaser, and I didn't want to do that again. Hey, this is Scott and Bart, Scotch Test Dummies. Thank you,
Scott. Hello, Bart.
Thank you for coming in and joining us.
Thank you.
We're about 100 people that are watching right now, but we are live on YouTube.
Mark's with us.
Hey, John.
Mark Gillespie is with us as well.
Hello, Mark.
Hey, John.
Hello, Mark.
Go ahead, John. For those that are watching, I'm sure everybody knows you, but if they don't, introduce yourself and what you do.
Well, okay. My name is John Glaser, and I make whiskey, Scotch whiskey.
Wonderful. Scotch whiskey.
Yes, you do.
One thing, this is Bart, John. One thing that Scott had said early on, we've probably been at this for about 4 years, but he had picked up your Compass Box Circus, and Scott has a little bit of the collector gene in him. And I would always tease him because he wasn't able to get a hold of 2 bottles. And I kept saying, you've got to open that. And probably 2 years into our live experience here, he'd said, if we ever get John Glaser on, I'll open it. And guess what he has done? He has opened the circus.
All right.
So thank you. One thing we were also going to do is a couple fans have already sent us some questions that they had. So we'll probably ask those. And then we had a few things, and we might get a few live ones coming in as well, if that's okay with you.
Great. So Sunday midday, you guys you're talking whiskey.
Love it.
I mean, it's 6 o'clock thing where I live, and so that's a respectable time to be thinking about whiskey. But you guys, middle of the day, that's amazing.
Oh yes, and when we do pre-recorded shows, sometimes on our days off, we're even a little bit earlier than that. So,
Right.
And I want to thank you personally as well, because early on I was not a peat head. I am such a peat head now, and it was strictly because of Peat Monster.
Okay.
Scott had actually picked it up, and we were earlier enough. Part of our whole show is kind of, we're the Dummies. It's our journey as we go deeper and deeper into Scotch and world whiskeys and even bourbons and everything from the U.S. And I even knew not to prejudge bottles by their color. I knew you didn't have color added, but he's like, you've got to come over and try this Peat Monster. And for whatever reason, I fell into the same deal. Oh, it's so light. He's like, just try it. And I was not a fan of the peat until that point, and I tried it. And I'm telling you, the explosion of flavors and smoke that came with Peat Monster led me down such a wonderful peat head path. So with you here, I wanted to definitely give you kudos for that. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad it brought into the club.
Now, I know you may have. Do we want to get into John's?
Let's let John talk. What
Yeah.
he had something he wanted to talk about today, and then we'll some of our questions and the questions we have from fans we'll bring up if we have time at the end.
Okay. Well, so you're referring to the whiskey we're about to release?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're about to release. I think it's being air-shipped over, literally. It might even be today as we speak. It could be on a plane. We normally ship our whiskeys by boat, shipping containers, but we wanted to get this one. This one we was a little behind schedule, so we're air shipping a limited edition at the moment to the U.S. And it's otherwise being shipped around the world in other ways. It's a limited edition of Hedonism. We've done several in the years past, and this is another. This one's called Hedonism, the Muse, and it's the Muse, M-U-S-E. So, and it's we named it that for a couple of reasons. One is there was one cask of whiskey of a blend of single grain whiskeys that we were sold or we were offered that the seller didn't know the distillery origin of them. It was just blend of different grain whiskeys. It was aged in a sherry butt, but not a very active one, obviously a refill sherry cask. And it was quite old, and we loved it. It was a little more intensely flavored than the types of grain whiskeys we normally use for hedonism, but we loved it. And it inspired us to build a blend around it, and more sort of, as I say, intensely flavored version of hedonism with an older age profile. We called it the Muse. And we also called it that because hedonism was the first whiskey I bottled when I started the company 18 years ago, Compass Box. And, I started this company with a grain whiskey of all things, even though we went on to make our reputation more with malt whiskeys and blended scotches. But grain whiskey is what I started with. I put an image of a woman's face on the label. And as far as anyone knows that we've ever talked to, there's no one at that point had ever put a woman's face on a Scotch whiskey label, ever. This was, this whiskey has always been a signature for us, and it has literally inspired a lot of people to look at Scotch whiskey in different ways, because not everybody's encountered really good Scotch grain whiskey aged in good barrels like this. So the Muse is coming, and it's also we wanted to launch it at this time of year because actually this week is Thursday. It's International Women's Day, and it's we for at least a decade or more, we've always acknowledged International Women's Day, and we thought this would be a nice time to release a new hedonism whiskey with the iconic label of the woman's face on it, and as a nod to the women in our business. My business, we're 15 people, but over half of them, 8 of them are women. That's very unusual in Scotch whiskey or whiskey in general.
Wonderful.
So that's what's coming, guys. Hedonism, the Muse.
I love it. And I think Mark had mentioned Mark, do you have a sample of that as well?
Yes, I received a sample a couple of weeks ago, but no supporting information to go along with it. I was just told you'll have to wait until March 8th to find out everything else. So I'm busily taking notes down here. But a question for you, John. If I remember correctly, this is one of the first projects that your new assistant, Katie, has been working on, right?
Make sure, John, if you can hear him.
Yeah, Katie's. Yeah, I can hear him.
Okay.
Yeah, Katie Morris manages marketing for us. Jill Boyd is.
I'm sorry, Jill. I'm sorry.
Our whiskey maker for the last year. She joined us just over a year ago, and this is a recipe that Jill led on in terms of the recipe development. Yes.
Very nice. That's good. Good insider information there, Mark.
That's great.
Jill took over from Greg Glass, who went on to work with Richard Patterson. But tell us about Jill's background, because we haven't really had a chance to get to know her really well yet.
Well, Jill joined us just over a year ago. She had been working up at a small distillery that some of you will have heard of called Glenfiddich. And she was she was doing sensory assessment, so whiskey assessment, and primarily new make assessment, but also mature assessment. And we brought her down to the big city of London and have installed her in the blending room. And yeah, she's been with us for just over a year. One of the things that's interesting that you're talking about Jill and how she led on this recipe is one of the things we're going to start doing with this recipe, with this whiskey, is giving the credit to the people in our business who lead the development process for creating these whiskeys. And sometimes recipe ideas come from me, and obviously going back in time, all of them did. But Greg Glass was with us for so long, and Jill's been with us now just over a year. And the ideas and the recipe development, not everything comes from me. Everything really is a team effort, and there are others in the office in London, in the blending room, who contribute as well. Our head of operations, for example, Elias is involved in whiskey as well. And it's a team effort, but there's usually one person who kind of is the leader on a particular recipe. And we're going to start giving credit to that person because, at the end of the day, this is a creative business that we're in. And in the same way that a perfume company will give credit to the person who created a scent, in the same way that musicians, bands give credit to the people who wrote the songs that they play. We need to show people that our creative output is driven by a team, but there's usually one person who's kind of a driving force, or one person who had the original vision for an idea. I want to give those people credit.
Sure. We love that. That is great.
No, and that was one of the questions, John, that we had for you a few years ago when Mark interviewed you on his video on his YouTube channel. You had mentioned you had 7 employees at the time, and we were going to ask you where you were at now with that.
And you're at 15.
We're 15 now. Yeah, 15.
Wow.
And 4 based in the U.S. One, Celine's up in Edinburgh. She manages sales for Europe in particular, and we've got 10 in London, in the main office in the blending room.
That is phenomenal. Well, you know what else we covet? We covet the what look like these glass bowls of whiskey that you have in your London office that you said you'll every once in a while you just got to have a little whiskey at work.
Well, yeah,
The display was phenomenal, and then even the concept was. We were just like, because immediately I told Scott, I've got to ask, and he said those beautiful bowls of whiskey. I said, yes. What do you? I know it probably changes, but do you have something maybe that you're working on, or is it an old standby that is in those?
So I think you're talking about the demijohns, the big glass demijohns that we have.
Yes.
We've got them in all shapes, or they're all different sizes, 5 liters to 25 liters, and we keep various things in there. Sometimes it's individual single whiskey, single malt whiskey or grain whiskey. Sometimes over the years it's been cocktails, blended cocktails. Right now we've got a big display in the office of these, and we have some fun with it because they're all on. There's about probably 15 or 20 of them on a big, huge shelf, and most of it's really we do it as much as for storage. We do it for decoration as well. So right now you come to our office in London, to the blending room, and there's about 15, 20 of these things on a huge shelf, and one of them has whiskey in it at the moment, and all the others are colored water.
Really?
We spirit caramel, which we don't use in our whiskeys, but we keep some around to show people what it's like. We colored water and fill the others. And so when visitors come, we say, okay, see this shelf with 15 or 20 Jimmy Johns? One of those is real whiskey. The rest are colored water. If you pick right, you get to take home a whiskey. If you pick wrong, you get to take home colored water. So we just have some fun with it.
I love it. That's exactly. I saw those.
You knew that when I was there, John.
Now,
What Mark say?
that was Mark. Well, Mark, what was that again?
Said you didn't do that when I was there visiting a couple of years ago, John.
No, this is a game we invented in the last several months.
now, you touched on the labeling for Hedonism, the Muse that's coming out. A lot of people, Bart and I included, are huge fans of your packaging, your labeling, the boxes, all of the thought that's going into this.
Well, the attention to the detail.
The attention to detail. And my comparison is to Steve Jobs from Apple, is he wanted the whole experience to be great. I mean, from the box, the packaging, opening it up, he wanted everything to be an experience. Is that kind of how you see,
Sure.
your labeling and the artwork that you have going on?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We take it really seriously, and because what we're creating. I mean, okay, you guys know that Compass Box well enough to know that our whiskeys are not. They're for adventurous drinkers. They're not for everybody. People who are dyed in the wool. I only drink singles. I never touch anything that's not a thing. That's fine. That's fine. So our whiskeys are for more adventurous folks, and part of buying Compass Box or part of enjoying a Compass Box whiskey, in my mind, it's first and foremost it's the liquid, of course, but it's also the way we present it, and the label we put, the name we put on it, the story behind that name, the story behind the creation of that recipe, that blend. It's also partly our very open-minded approach to enjoying whiskey. It's okay to add it if you want to put ice cube in your expensive old whiskey. That's okay. That's up to you. If you want to use some of our whiskey to make a really serious cocktail, that's okay. I mean, maybe not the really the limited editions necessarily, but we're very it's an experience that we're creating, and the labels. And I was actually literally talking to my sons Josh and Zach today, having lunch here in London, and we were talking. I was talking to them about the importance of editing and reviewing their essays that they're writing for school. Okay, they're teenagers, and the importance of editing. You put it down, come to it the next day and edit it. That editing makes great writing. Great writing is iterative, and it's the same thing. I'm saying, look at the label. I pulled down a bottle of Lost Blend from my shelf, and I said, look at the label on the back label. All that copy. We'd spend days and hours working on this. And it's an editing job. It's an iterative job. And great writing, great creative ideas really are almost always a product of an iterative process. And so anyway, so the labels are very important. Yeah, some people look at them and say, oh, it's whimsical or that's whatever. But it's part of what we do. It's part of the experience that we're creating for people is the names and the labels and the stories behind the liquid as well as the liquid.
Do you have a particular art studio that does most of your labels, or do you work with a bunch of different artists?
We work for our labels over the last 10 years. We've been working primarily with an agency called Stranger and Stranger, and they're based in London. They got some offices, one in New York, one in San Francisco, but they're based in London. Stranger and Stranger, and we've been working with them for 10 years, and they're amazing, as you guys will know from the work they've done for us. In fact, we're actually celebrating the 10 years of working with them, because it's really unusual for in our industry for people to work with a design agency that long. Big companies kind of go through design agencies like you go through changes of the laundry. For us, 10 years is important, and so we're actually working on a Compass Box Stranger and Stranger limited edition that will release later in this year, and just to celebrate that. So 10 years of working with Stranger and Stranger. We'll have that whiskey out later in the year.
What are you going to call it, John? Stranger Things?
Can you repeat that?
Mark wanted to know if you were going to call it Stranger Things.
We might have some trouble with some intellectual property there. No, it'll be.
Well, that's never stopped you before.
Stranger and Stranger just seems perfect. It seems like a natural for a Compass Box whiskey name. Stranger and Stranger.
How are we doing on time, John? I know we talked what your time frame would be here.
Well, I'm okay for the moment. Let's carry on.
Okay, good.
Mark, did Mark have any questions he wanted to get in? I didn't want to have him just sitting.
Well, I've been sitting here sampling the Muse, the Hedonism Muse, and correct me if I'm wrong. I tried to read the label with my failing eyesight and my high-powered glasses, and I can't read the ABV on this sample, John. Am I seeing this as 55%?
53.3.
53.3. Okay. Little tiny label here, and I'm trying to read this thing, and the type is about yay big. But I just on my initial impression, John, and I've said this before, I've never had a bad Compass Box whiskey yet in your 18 years, and this is a winner. I love the fruitiness, the subtle spices on the nose, the citrus notes I get. I get a great bit of ginger root on the palate, the spice that just sort of sets it off. And I think you've got a winner here. I'm looking forward to posting my tasting notes for this pretty soon.
Well,
that's great to hear.
John, I know that you can't be.
I was tasting it yesterday with somebody who was in the blending room yesterday, and she described it, and she put a touch of water into it, and it opened it up because it is 53.3 cast strength. Put a touch of water in it, and you know what it reminded her? She just looked at me and she said, "This is pralines and cream." It's like pralines and cream ice cream that I used to eat when I was a kid.
Wow.
And as soon as she said it, bam, I got it too. So I don't know if you're getting pralines and cream, Mark, but apparently it's...
I've never been a fan of pralines, so it's not something I normally have in my portfolio, on my taste portfolio, but yeah, I could see that.
John, I know that you can't be forthcoming with information. We can ask, what can you release as far as whiskeys involved in Hedonism, the Muse, and maybe the ages of them?
Well, yeah, sure. We can tell you anything that you want if you ask. I think I'll answer your question, but just for clarity here, because people do ask questions like that frequently to us these days. We have always, for all the 18 years that I've been in business, told everybody everything. Openness and transparency is extremely important to our business. I think everybody deserves to know what they're drinking. And you know what? I want to tell people. I want people to know what the recipes are for our blends, the distilleries we draw from, the types of casks we use. That's part of understanding whiskey or anything, really. Understanding the detail behind it, understanding where the various flavors are coming from. So we've always told people, if you look at our website now, all the recipes are there in terms of distilleries, or in some cases, if we don't tell you the distillery name, we'll tell you the village. Just out of respect for the trademark of the distillery in some cases, but we'll tell you the distillery, we'll tell you the cask type. And we have always, for the first 15 years of business, told everybody the ages for every component, because that's really important. Sometimes we use 10-year-old whiskeys, grain whiskeys, and sometimes we use 40-year-old grain whiskeys. One is not better than the other. They're different. And you'll get different kinds of, you'll get deeper, richer flavors in a 40-year-old than you will in a 10-year-old. You'll get more fruit, and you'll get more sort of verve in the younger one. So age is really important to understanding what a whiskey is going to deliver. So 2 years ago, we were reported to Whisky Association for disclosing the ages of all the whiskeys, because there has been an old obscure law in place in the EU and the UK for several decades that says that spirits producers are only legally allowed to convey the age of a component of a blend if it's the youngest. We're only really legally allowed to tell you the youngest. Now, that goes back to the time when, spirits producers used to do unscrupulous things like, say, hey, there's 60-year-old whiskey in this blend, and they'd actually just put like a drop in it,
right.
if that. And so that's why the law no longer makes sense, particularly with companies like ours and other companies today that are saying, here's everything that's in it, percentage by percentage. Here's all the detail. And so as soon as we were reported, they called us up and said, you're disclosing the age of all the components. You're not supposed to do that. Okay, so that we knew this day was coming, so we started a conversation then with the Scotch Whisky Association to try to convince them and their members, the Scotch whisky industry, that this law needs to change. If we're disclosing 100% of what's in our products, we're not just saying, hey, it's got 40-year-old whiskey in it. We're showing it everything. And you ought to have not necessarily the obligation, but the freedom to do that. Okay, so we've not convinced the Scotch Whisky Association, its members, to change the law, and it's a complicated situation without going into a lot of detail. For now, until we can get the industry to see the light and lobby the governments change the law. I can only tell you the older ages of a blend if you ask me, and you have asked me, so thank you very much. But that's the law. That's the law. So the Muse has several whiskeys, and this is most of our recipes tend to be 3, 4, maybe 5 ingredients. This has got several different ingredients. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 different grades. It starts with this lovely, what I described earlier, this blended grain whiskey, a blend of single grain whiskeys that had been in barrel for 33 years in a sherry butt. And we don't know the distilleries, but it doesn't matter because it's gorgeous, the whiskey. And that was the heart of this recipe. And around it, we put in whiskeys from the Port Dundas Distillery, North British, Strathclyde, and in Gordon, Grain Whiskey Distillery. While blended grain, which was 33 years, was the heart of this, was a sherry butt, a refill sherry butt, as we call them. Everything else was aged in American oak. Hogsheads, recharred barrels, first fill bourbon barrel, all American oak. And so you're getting a lot of that vanilla character that American oak delivers. And the ages range from, I think, 4% of the recipe is a 17-year-old Port Dundas. And then there's 21-year-old North British, 23-year-old North British. There's 28-year-old Port Dundas. There's some 16% of the recipe is 43-year-old Strathclyde. There's also some 29-year-old Invergordon. So it's a complex whiskey built from several different grain whiskey components from different ages, just layering on complexity. Does that answer the question?
It sounds delicious. And
it is.
Yeah, Mark says it is delicious.
the rush is going to be on to procure a bottle of that, I can tell you.
That's right.
John, what's the price point on this? I haven't seen a price since I haven't seen the news release. What's it going to cost?
What's it going to cost? That's a really good question in the U.S. And you know what? I don't have the exact number, so I don't want to mislead anybody. I don't know, but it's going to be expensive. It's going to be really expensive. But for us, really expensive isn't ridiculous. You know, it's over $200 and heading toward $300, I think. But you guys can't quote me on it. Sorry, I'm not prepared.
That's fine. We will not quote.
You're looking at the same price range as 3-year-old deluxe, at least in the States, then probably. Because I think it was it was $260 at least in our area, and I think
undetermined at this point.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, and the prices of our whiskeys, guys, are a function of the age of the components. You know, we are not like some brands that are, you know, putting a big premium on top of things because you can.
Sure.
Because of the brand equity that they've built up, and our whiskeys are pricing as a function of primarily of age.
Sure.
Do you have time for a couple of questions from fans, John?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. I'll start with Scott Slattery, who's the fellow that kind of helped get us all together here. He had several questions, but I'm going to work in one here. Given his success, meaning your success, John, in raising the popularity / acceptability of high quality blends? Has it become easier or harder for you to obtain barrels, or does it just depend on whatever is available for supply and or your relationships?
Yeah, that's a good question. For us, we are in a very privileged and very fortunate position in Scotch whiskey. I've been doing this for a while, for 18 years. I worked for the biggest Scotch whiskey distilling company in the industry before starting Compass Box. And I started at a time that you guys probably, I don't know if you can remember, what it was like 18 years ago in the world of Scotch whiskey. It was not a good time for Scotch whiskey.
Sure.
Global sales of Scotch were flat or declining, depending on the country, depending on the year. Single malts were growing, but they've always been a small portion of overall Scotch. And, single malts were growing, but they were also growing along with this reputation of being for, having rules about how you drink them and all this stuff. And they weren't necessarily that approachable to a lot of people. So it was a bad time for Scotch whiskey. And a lot of the big distilling companies were building up inventories because they laid down whiskey 10 or 20 years prior that they weren't selling. And so it was a tough time. So getting past leaving and starting Compass Box 18 years ago, you couldn't do it. 18 years ago, the company I used to work for, they'd sell cask directly to retailers in Scotland. They were just selling cask, small quantities. Those days are over. But we have a lot of we've got long-standing relationships and we've got supply contracts in place. So we're in a really fortunate position. Yeah, and so I wouldn't say that supply is harder. I'm grateful that we have access to so much. But again, it's because we've been doing it for a long time and we've had agreements in place for a long time with several companies.
Another question, Tom R asks, and some people may know this. He's curious to know if you consider one distillery above the others as producing a great Scotch that makes for a great base for your blended Scotches.
It's a really good question. A lot of people who follow what we do over the years and sort of study our recipes and so forth will know that one of my favorite malt whiskeys to work with, one of my favorite single malts to work with, is malt whiskey from the Clanleash distillery in Brora in northern Scotland. It's special, especially as it gets into over 10 years old. It starts to get really special, and it develops what we call in our blending room in the office. We call it ethereal character. It develops this. Think of it almost like umami. It's like this character that just calls you back. It's got like this almost savory character to it, and it just, when you blend it with other things, it just lends that resultant blend magic. So there are a few other distilleries that will develop similar characteristics over time to what malt whiskey from Clanleash Distillery gets, but it's special stuff.
I agree. I have we haven't done our review of it yet, but the 14-year-old Clanleash is around, and very, very tasty. It's a very good, you can tell, a very good one to work with.
Scott has another great question here. Have you ever had to pass on a barrel because it was too challenging to find something that would blend successfully with it?
That's a good question. Well, so in the autumn, we released a limited edition whiskey called No Name, and its recipe is comprised primarily of malt whiskey from the Ardbeg distillery, and I've, since before I started Compass Box, been a fan of Ardbeg for forever, it seems. We were offered a parcel, not from the distillery, from another company, a couple of years ago, and it was beautiful. It was about 11, 12 when we first were offered it. And we spent, Greg Glass and I, we spent a year trying to work it into a recipe, and we just couldn't make it work. It was either we were kind of just like diluting the character of the Ardbeg and it wasn't shining as much as it should, or it just wasn't working. And it was because we were using it as a minority component in all these different recipe ideas, blend ideas, thinking of the power of it, just want to use it as a minority component. Well, in the end, we just flipped that on its head. And we said, you know what? This parcel is so beautiful. Let's just make it the centerpiece. And so the recipe for No Name makes the malt whiskey from the Ardbeg distillery. It's about 75% of the recipe. And then we just shape it and temper it with some old malt whiskey from the Kalila and the Kleinluch distilleries and a little bit of French oak finish whiskey. And we just shaped it, tempered it, and let it shine. Because there was, for a year, we were like, this is so good, but what are we going to do with it? And we just didn't have the idea right. But we finally got it in the end, and that became No Name.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and we reviewed it and found it very nice as well.
And it continued to open up as I sampled it. The fans had fun at my expense, because at first I was like, well, it's about this, and then I was like, hold on, it's improving as I'm tasting. Hold on.
Yeah, it does open up. It does open up in the glass and open up with a splash of water. Yeah, yeah,
definitely.
How are we doing time wise, John?
I've got more time than I thought. How about 10 more minutes?
Okay,
sure,
sounds good.
Anything from Mark?
Mark,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, Mark, you got any questions?
Well, I'm curious how you come up with the names for these, like No Name and Phenomenology, which was the other one you released last fall. How do you come up with the names for these? Because these are really creative. And is it something that the team comes up with in your office? Do you work with the Stranger and Stranger folks on it? How do you come up with these names?
They come from all over the place. Inspiration can come from anywhere. Whether it's an idea for a whiskey, for a blend, or a name or whatever. Sometimes the names come from the liquid itself. Peat Monster being an obvious example, Spice Tree. And they come from all over the place. I mean, it's us. We give the names to Stranger and Stranger, and ask them to design around it. I mean, No Name just came up because I originally, Ardbeg, hugely peaty. I wanted just a black label. I said, guys, let's just do a black label, just black. Compass Box Black.
That's beautiful.
Call it Compass Box Black Label. And the guys in the office thought, that's not a very good idea, because there's another whiskey out there in the world called Black Label, and its owners might not really appreciate that. So we decided that we went round and round on different name ideas, and finally we ran out of time. It's like, sometimes a painter has to, they only will finish the painting because if they don't, because the gallery opening is on their eyes. So we had to finally close down this and put a name on it so we could get it in bottles and sell it. And we just decided, you know what? We're just going to call it No Name. We're just going to, we can't agree on a name for it. We'll just call it No Name. And so, that's how things happen.
Sure. Scott's displaying it now. So everything from the strong black wax that goes all the way down the neck onto the upper part of the barrel part of the bottle.
The gold inlay, everything beautiful. Well done. Well
we like waxing bottles. We've got there's this team of women that do our bottling at Broxburn in Scotland, and they are becoming wax experts for us. It's everyone is dipped by hand. There are no machines in there.
Really?
I have a question for you, John, about watching some of your video series on CompassBoxWhisky.com. You have your whiskey maker series, and you address you don't use the colorant, you don't chill filter.
Mm-hmm.
You go into how all of your blends, you marry them, you blend them together, and then you put them into a cask for another set period of time. Have you ever tasted something, blended it, and said, yeah, this is it? And then once you married it in a cask, it turned into something different, either good or bad?
Usually it's good. Yeah, and that's why we marry. When you guys ever come through London and come into the blending room, we'll show you what we do. And, we're constantly working on blend recipes every week of of the year. And, so on Friday, there was blending up a couple of things that we'll probably taste Monday or Tuesday, and you know, I say to people, we taste these things in the blending room, it's like looking at something with your eyes squinted, because you're only getting a sense for what it's really going to be. When you bish something together and then you just taste it that day or the day after or a couple days later, it's not really, the flavors haven't really knit together. The equilibrium of all those different components hasn't really been reached yet. It takes time. And that's why we marry. So usually things, well, in almost every instance, things improve with marrying. We've never had an instance where things went wrong with marrying. No.
Wonderful. Well, I know we're getting there. Thank you for your passion and your attention to detail, your love of whiskey. The fans out there that have not tried what the mastery of a blended whiskey brings you, if you have any doubts at all, start with Compass Box, because you'll see the artisanal expertise that comes from the craft of blending. And I know we got exposed as the Dummies early on. We quickly were able to understand, wow, there's a depth in the blend that's just phenomenal. And I really think that it comes from the quality of your selections and the marrying that you do. So thanks from the Dummies.
Yeah. Well, there's one point you made me think about that I just want to share before I go.
Sure.
This is something that not everybody realizes who's interested in whiskey, particularly Scotch whiskey. Everybody blends. Everybody blends. Unless you're talking about a single cask bottling, one cask. That's, anybody can do that.
Right.
But unless you're talking about a single cask bottling, everybody blends. Even our favorite single malt brands are blended from different casks,
right,
from one distillery. And they will be different types of casks. One might be American oak, barrel, one might be American oak hogshead, one might be sherry. They might be different ages. The age statement on the bottle is just going to be the youngest. But there is a person, the people who I worked with in my past, when I was working for a big blended Scotch whiskey brand, were the same people who were in charge of blending casks for the single malt brands to make sure every batch of that single malt was consistent bottling to bottling. Blending is part and parcel of what we do in whiskey making. And when people realize that, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for their enjoyment of whiskey. We're just, we're not doing anything differently than the blender at a single malt distillery is doing. They're blending from casks from under one roof, one place. We're blending casks, but just we choose them from different places.
Right.
And so it's exactly the same. And once people get that, it just opens up whole new world of possibility. Blending is part and parcel of how you make, how you create a whiskey. It's not just, run through the still, put it in wood for a long time, and then just bottle whatever comes out. You think about what you want to bottle in the future. And the decisions you make on how you distill and the types of casks you put it in and the length of time you leave it in those casks, those shape the whiskey to your vision of what you want to bottle in the future. And if you're drawing from casks from one distillery, fine, variations on a theme. We're drawing casks from a couple different distilleries for our products to make something that no single distillery can make. And once people understand that everybody's blending, then, as I say, a whole new world's of opportunity and enjoyment are opened up for us. So, with that, gentlemen,
yes, sir.
Mark, Scott, Bart, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for.
Thank you very much for what you're doing for the world of whiskey. Sharing the joys of great whiskey with more people in the world. That's what our business is all about. That seems to be what you guys are all about, and I really appreciate it and grateful for it.
Yes, sir.
Well, good. Thank you for coming on, and maybe in the future we can do more. Our people will get with your people, and
which is us.
Thanks, John.
All right, guys.
All right. Thank you much.
Have a great day. Have a great day.
Thanks, John. See you.
Thank you.
Bye
now.
All right, Mark.
That was awesome.
Yes. Has that Muse opened up any further? What else do you have?
Well, I switched over to, I switched over to my oldest bottle of Compass Box,
which is
the 2006 Magic Cask bottling that was done for the LCBO in Ontario.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a Canada release only.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I've still got this much of it left.
Let's do what Bart, what do you think about closing? We're right at the 1 hour mark. I think it would be good to close down this
come
stream.
right back on with Mark.
Yep, and then come right back. Give us about 5 minutes to set up the next stream. We'll get the invite out to Mark. It'll be a separate invite, Mark, and we'll come back. We'll continue our Compass Box talk and just go from there. What do you think?
Works for me, guys.
Thanks to everybody that tuned in. Thanks to George Kaplan. He super chatted us during that. I didn't want to interrupt John. Our time with John was limited as well. We had fielded some questions
and he actually
earlier.
Extended.
Yeah, we knew we could get John to talk longer.
Yes.
But we fielded some questions early. We apologize. I know we didn't address as many coming. We had a lot of comments, a lot of good questions coming in. Well, we're going to shut down this stream. We'll be back in about 5 minutes.
Right back with Mark and more Compass Box.
Coin 415.
And 416, shut her down. And I know this is where the lag is you're shutting down. So
and you say, what do you say?
I say, Scotch it, you Scotch gods.
Cilantro.
Dummies. I never got to yell